Letitia, thank you so much for joining us. Good
morning.
This really is an important conversation to be had, specifically on our campuses. We've seen a lot of focus on our tertiary institutions over the last few years, and it's very much become a mirror of life outside of those campuses. And the issues that we deal with in our communities are the same issues that the student population on those tertiary institution campuses are dealing with. Why did you find it was important to even start having this conversation at this time?
Just to latch on to what you've just said, Marcel, universities are indeed a microcosm of society, and we have found that as is happening in society, there's such an increased demand for mental health services with very resource constraints, with many resource constraints. And so as an institution, we realized that it was time for us to start considering a more proactive approach to mental health and shifting from a very pathology-based response to really trying to give students agency and give the institution agency. And so our mental health policy really is our commitment to our students and our broader university community to let them know that when we have a clear mental health and wellness policy, it will create a framework to clarify roles, to help students understand that they really do matter and that the mental health as a key contributor to the student success is really important to us.
Now, what have you heard from your student body? Where do you believe are the most important points where you will have to focus on in terms of their mental health needs? What are some of the issues that they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
So what's been really interesting, Marcel, is that the preliminary findings of our study firstly highlights that there's an interconnectedness between staff and students. And so when we talk about the student experience and student success, it's pertinent for us to understand that we also have to understand where staff are and how they are responding, because that affects the student experience. But coming back to your question around what students are requiring, students have a range of requirements for both tangible and intangible support. And our preliminary findings actually show that one of the greatest student support needs is actually funding. Financial constraints have been found to be quite a major contributor, and in the context of the dysfunctionality, if I could call it that, of the funding financial aid services in the country, you can imagine the profound effect it's had on our students' mental health. The second thing as well is students come and in mass into tertiary education with hope of a better life. And the reality is that access without contextual and relevant support is actually not an opportunity. And so when students are coming in and they're not able to have accommodation, they don't have money to get to campus, they are hungry, they are experiencing major relational problems within their homes, guess what? We have found that these are the top three: financial, relational issues, and that causes, and it's the major causes for our student body in terms of their mental health. The other major issue that's come up is actually time pressure. And so we find that students come in, many of them are first generation students, and their parents and families do not have an understanding of what is required of education at that level. And so guess what? They are coming to study to pursue a better life. There are high expectations from parents and families. But the other thing is, we found that when students get their financial aid, they are actually expected to still support their families. And so our students, even with financial aid, have to give that money very often. And this is happening throughout South Africa, where students who depend on financial aid, they are the very same students whose families depend on them.
Yeah, the issue around being the first to go to tertiary and go to a university is a very, very important the point that you've made, and one that's not being spoken about enough as well. Just one last question before I let you go, because unfortunately we have run out of time. You're also dealing with a market or a part of our population where they're at the age of wanting to keep up with the Joneses. We've got the pressure of social media. We've got all of those things that all come together on this little space that you call a campus. Is there a point of your discussion? We were also talking about students having somebody to speak to. Are there resources for there to be enough people for them to speak to when they have issues that they just can't speak to a friend about, and they just don't know where else to go?
So Marcel, I think a great stigma about mental health is the perception that the only people who are able to assist students with mental health specifically is a psychologist or a counselor. And I think I want to just highlight the polarity. Very often there's a natural response to trauma in our lives, and we need family, friends. And then, of course, I think psychologists and counselors are really for mental health disorders. But I want to highlight the fact that at the institution, we've really focused a lot on how do we get students to how do we create a sense of belonging for our students. So we create many opportunities for students to engage beyond the classroom in the co-curricular space. So we have peer mentoring programs, leadership academies, first year first programs, our residences, the Centre for Student Support Services, SDS as a whole, student development and support as a whole. And the institution has an entire program focused on the first year experience and beyond first year, really looking at how do we get young people to engage. Because guess what? Despite the belief that students want to engage on social media, they are actually yearning for connection. They are actually yearning for someone just to listen. And so we may not be able to find all the answers for them, but I believe that as an institution, our priority is to help students understand that they are empowered, they have the agency. So we have even proactive measures using predictive analytics, where we actually give students at UWC a map which shows them these are your strengths, these are the risk factors, and this is a map that you can use to take action. So it's beyond just giving information. It's important for us to get them engaged, get them to own their success, and understand that when you take care of your mental health, you are going to be productive, you are going to perform better, and beyond just education, you are going to be a better person in life.
And indeed a great step towards creating an enabling university environment. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, that's our priority. Thank you.
Letitia Permal is the Director of the University of the Western Cape Centre for Student Support Services.